I'm with Max Meyer, everybody. Welcome to Walk-Ins Welcome.
Thank you, Bridget.
Max, it's a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. I've been listening and watching you on the internet since I was in high school.
Really?
I always thought you were brilliant and hilarious, and I'm so thrilled to be here.
How did you find out about me?
You know, it was Twitter. There were like 150 accounts that I followed, and I think that you would just sort of, you were in peak posting back in that sort of like 16, 17 era.
Yeah.
And I was following along. When Dumpster Fire launched, I'd listened to that. I listened to Walk-Ins Welcome, and I think the moment when I really started to appreciate all of it was when you went on the Glenn Beck show in maybe 2018 or 19.
Yep.
And I just thought it was one of the most tremendous podcasts I'd ever listened to. I was so inspired by the whole thing, and it's one of the sort of episodes that I've listened to 5 or 6 times among podcasts.
Oh, interesting. What was inspiring about it? I'm so curious.
I just thought that your life story was so amazing, and the ability to translate adversity into joy for other people.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was great. And Glenn's admiration was palpable, and it got through to me.
Glenn, it was funny. I went on Michael Malice's podcast after that, and it was the first time Malice and I had sat down. He was still in New York, and we were laughing about how I went on Glenn Beck, and I was like, "Did you know the left has double standards?" Like I was just like this baby lamb in this sea of wolves that knew nothing about the culture, or I really knew nothing about right-wing media, other than like I had a vague sense that it existed, but being raised very left-wing and in the culture that is very left-wing dominant, I just didn't know anything. Somebody made a joke like the fact that I called it the National Review was just so revealing that I knew nothing about right-wing media.
Well, I mean, I was raised listening to the Rush Limbaugh show.
Okay.
My dad created World of Warcraft characters after his favorite radio hosts, and so we had Rush Limbaugh, we had Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck was a gnome warlock. That was the World of Warcraft character, and so Rush and Glenn and Sean Hannity were people that my father loved to listen to. We'd go on drives, and Glenn and Rush and Sean were always on AM radio. And AM radio is they can broadcast it nationwide anywhere. It's not local stations, and so you have millions of people who are out trucking, driving vans, working on work sites, and they listen to AM radio.
Yeah.
And my dad was like that. So
what did your dad do?
He was a pilot.
Okay.
So he'd listen to Rush on deployment.
Oh, okay.
In the Air National Guard around the country.
Okay.
And so I'd been I'd heard Glenn on and off since I was a young kid.
Wow. Yeah, I think I still find AM radio to be the best. I mean, I still think it's fascinating because I think a lot of people still listen to it.
They're trying to get rid of it.
Why?
Who's
trying to get rid of it?
Federal regulatory agency. So all right.
They're like, shut it down.
I mean, yeah, I have a very cynical view on it. I think so. They want to get rid of. Right now, it's a regulation that every vehicle produced in the United States has to have AM and FM radio because people in rural areas just can't get FM.
Right.
And so they want to get rid of that requirement so that the automakers will stop putting AM radio in, which would basically mean that you just can't listen to talk radio anymore. So I mean, I do take the conspiratorial view. They see AM radio as the biggest outlet of right-wing ideas. At the peak of the Rush Limbaugh show, they had 20 million unique listeners every single week.
Wow.
20 million. It was nearly 10% of the country that was tuning in every 7 days. Mm-hmm. If you just get rid of that, you get rid of a huge sort of artery of right-wing ideas for people that are at work.
Right.
NPR you can get on Sirius XM now.
Yeah.
A lot of these more modern shows you can get on the app. But truckers don't want to be scrolling Spotify. They want to tune to the signal that they know, listen to AM while they drive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of in the vein of your futuristic worldview, how long are truckers going to be around?
Yeah, it's I think they'll probably be around for a while longer. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see hundreds of thousands of robot trucks at some point in the 2030s. Mm-hmm. You probably won't have it for all of these long overland routes or for all of the last mile delivery. But yeah, it's going to be a big revolution. But you know, those people they'll still be working jobs where they're going to want to where it's sort of, you know, same industries in logistics.
Yeah.
You probably won't see a decrease in the number of people working in logistics. Historically, the trend has been that when you automate an industry, you're not really replacing the jobs, you're changing them.
Right.
So
yeah, I think about, like, I've done a lot of driving around this country and seeing these mountain roads and these treacherous passes through certain back roads in Colorado where you'll see truckers going, and I'm not sure how, you know, robots can navigate it, but I'm sure maybe better than humans.
well, yeah, it turns out that they're better than most people at most things.
Right.
You know, they can't trick the smartest people, and they may be worse than the best drivers. They're definitely better than the worst drivers. And so I think what's much more likely is that you see millions of robo taxis and self-driving cars going around before trucks in sort of treacherous mountain passes. But you could imagine the hundreds of miles between, you know, Omaha and Cheyenne being a lot of robot trucks, because that's very easy to automate. It's one line.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
you just have to exit the highway to charge the truck back up. And you know,
Wow.
the next generation of these trucks will probably be able to go, you know, well over 1,000 miles on a charge, and so
Wow.
they'll be able to stop about as often as humans do.
Wow.
Maybe less.
Wow.
You know, the robot doesn't have to
Pee and sleep.
shower,
Get an
exactly.
HJ from a prostitute in a parking lot.
Truck stop, Gary, Indiana.
We're really going to lose some American culture with this, though. I'm telling you, we're putting a lot of truck stop workers out of jobs.
No. You're going to have, you know, the robot truck attendants. There will be whole new jobs. You know, one of my favorite stories, you know, before 2008 or so, we didn't have widespread methods for computerized airplane tickets. So you know, United Airlines into the 2000s was still mailing millions and millions of tickets.
I always see these tweets from young kids who are like, how did you guys get your plane tickets?
No, but this is after the flights. After the flights, they would put all of the tickets in envelopes, and they'd mail them to a warehouse in Chicago and Houston, and they would manually check the tickets against the manifest to see who had boarded the plane. They didn't have a way to see who had boarded the plane. And so there were, you know, thousands of these ticket checkers at one point. And, you know, I'm always joking, imagine if the ticket checkers had unionized and said, we need to protect these good ticket checking jobs. We want the right to manually check these millions of tickets for years and years. Now, they did not unionize. The ticket checkers have gone away. But today, United Airlines has many, 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 many more employees. They're just not checking tickets. The people who would have otherwise been ticket checkers can now be, you know, flight attendants, ground crew, and they get to be a real airline. They don't have to employ thousands of ticket checkers. So it's like, you know, you're not going to have all of these truckers doing the exact same trucking routes that they're doing today. But what happens when you automate things and you get increased productivity and economic progress is that those companies can hire people to do other stuff to grow. And so, yeah, I think you'll see many more people working in logistics because it'll be even cheaper to, you know, send shit across the globe.
In your magazine, which is amazing for people who are just listening, Max is you're the editor-in-chief and
editor and publisher.
And publisher of Arena Magazine. And everybody should subscribe to it. I actually think my listeners and audience would love this magazine. Because a lot of them are more Luddites than normal, this is the great irony about your futuristic magazine. Is that I think Luddites are really going to like it.
Well, I mean, I'll say my version of pro-technology includes Luddites. You know, I own a 25-acre farm. I have a little cabin. The cabin has no electricity, no power, no running water. The cabin has a composting toilet and a bunch of paraffin-burning oil lamps.
You're right.
That's where I write some of my pro-technology views.
Yeah.
So I think people can balance between the idea that, you know, you can be against, you know, giving a 3-year-old an iPad at the dinner table, but you can be for the technologies that make all of us better off and that make our lives better, and the technologies that can give us our time back. You know, I think of maps. You know, the fact that we have maps means that everyone can get where they're going a lot quicker. If we can have success with self-driving cars, we'll get a lot of our time back, and there'll be much less time, making people miserable. And so,
Yeah.
technology can be, can be both things.
Yeah.
And so I encourage Luddites to take a look. And some of the, pro-tech propaganda in the magazine is being written by candlelight on a typewriter in my little cabin in Iowa.
I love that. I have so many thoughts. One is that, well, first of all, you're a brilliant writer. I love your writing. It is you are just a great writer. I hope you write a book because you really are an extreme talent. Tell people about the magazine and why you started it.
So I decided to start the magazine because I think of all the areas of the mainstream media that are the most sort of corrupt and demoralizing, I thought the tech media was at the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, there are good options all across the political media if you're tired of the mainstream. There are lots of alternatives now, and so people can get their fix of whatever perspective they want in the political media. In the tech media, you have these big names, TechCrunch, The Verge, Wired, that are insane. They're the most woke, and they seem to take as their job demoralizing people about the future, trying to make them fear things, and trying to dunk on anyone who's taking big risks. One of my sort of benchmarks is I don't think you can be an honest tech publication if you think that Elon Musk is public enemy number one,
Mm-hmm.
and you devote your time to trashing him and saying that all of his companies are frauds, which is basically what a number of these outlets are now into.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided that tech needed a compelling alternative where there'd be a pro-America voice, a sort of sane pro-technology voice that would present people with, the amazing benefits while also acknowledging some of the things that cause people to lose trust. So we've got a great article in the first issue about phones and kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I had emailed the author asking if she'd do a pro phones for kids article. She wasn't willing to go that far, but she said, I'll do a fair one where we're talking about the benefits and the drawbacks. There are some people that Mark Andreessen's been telling a joke recently that phones for kids is great because at least they're not listening to their teachers. And it's like, what would you rather have? Would you rather have like woke teacher or YouTube? That's an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
So what Nadia ended up writing for the magazine, she sort of compares phones to weapons, and that people need to be taught how to use them, and that they're more like a tool than anything, and that there can be amazing benefits, but that safety is important, and people should, especially with kids, give them digital media in moderation. So
yeah, it really is amazing. I talk a lot about this with people on the podcast, especially people with children, because if your family members like ours are living away in other parts of the country, now we have this amazing technology, FaceTime, where they can see one another. But my daughter at like under 2 years old knew how to swipe away a notification.
Yes.
Just because she was always FaceTiming her grandparents. So great that she has this continuous relationship with her grandparents, and also terrifying at how intuitive a lot of that technology is. I've always wanted to film a sketch where it's like, if a toddler, and I saw this when I was in India, I had an iPhone, and I don't think this kid had really seen that much, but the kid was looking at my iPhone and wanted to see my pictures and just intuitively started swiping on the iPhone. And I'm like, is this how they test these? They're like, give it to the 2-year-old.
We have billions of digital natives now.
Yeah.
Across the world.
Yeah.
And the internet and mobile phones have probably been the most powerful force for sort of the globalization of culture ever.
Mm-hmm.
In that everyone sort of knows, everyone knows what Coca-Cola is, everyone knows who Donald Trump is, and everyone knows how to use their thumb to flick a notification or play a YouTube video or whatnot.
So many of the young kids that we're hiring to help us with clips, because now everything is about feeding the algorithm.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we must feed the algorithm, and you've got to just keep feeding the algorithm. Everyone has become a content creator, even if you're especially people who work for themselves. You have to hustle and be a content creator on top of being a real estate agent in order to even compete. And if you're a content creator, you really have to compete. And we have these young hotshot kids in like Senegal and India, and I'm like, are they going to get jokes? Are they going to get American and they know, they're like, completely into the American culture wars, but just the culture wars in general. They know how to cut these videos together and make them fiery, and they're talented.
There's an old sort of concept within Facebook that the Philippines is the most online country, and they'd say if you ever want to rapidly test a feature, just release it in the Philippines. They'll try anything once. They'll try any sort of app or feature or whatnot. And so they deploy these things to 100 million Filipinos because they're very eager to sort of try things out. And so you have a lot of these middle income countries where being savvy on the internet is why their citizens are doing well.
Yeah.
And they can do work that would be considered very low wage in the United States, but connected with us via internet platforms, WhatsApp and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, even the work they're doing, like for us in their country, it's still not. I would say, if I asked an American, I have had Americans pitch me proposals to do the same, actually less work for 3 or 4 times the amount of money, and their work is better and it's not as expensive.
Yeah.
And they're really like, Maggie and I talk all the time about when we were having this meeting with this young kid from Senegal, and he was like, what is your strategy? What is your what's your brand strategy? What's your calendar? And we were like, huh? And he was, the look on his face of like, you guys, how are you even still in business? But he's also been raised, and he's younger. I'm Gen X. I remember we were like, it was not about selling out and being these kids are used to like, you are a brand. What is your strategy?
Well, and these kids now are learning to use the AI tools.
Yeah.
It's like the AI tools are already going to beat the Americans, who are more expensive and do less work. The kid in Senegal or the Philippines or Indonesia is learning how to use ChatGPT, is learning how to use sort of AI caption features, and is learning how to very quickly do a lot of this. They're taking advantage of it extremely well.
Yeah. I remember in 2012, or I think it was 2020. When was I in India? 2012 or 2013. And we flew into Chennai, and it was just books. They have the university there, and all of the coding books. All of these kids were learning this. I'm like, we are going to have our lunch eaten. Like the American kids are not learning this stuff. And the numbers that they were learning it in India, it was wild.
I think across the board, that's true. One of the great assets of the US is that we still do a great job of inculcating adventure and creativity within our sort of young elites.
Yeah.
And neither India nor China does that particularly well. I think it's maybe just an effect of, you go to one of these Chinese or Indian prep schools or to the universities, like the India Institute of Technology, IIT. It's oceans of very smart people. They're looking to prove their skills. I don't think that there's the sense of adventure. Whereas if you go to Berkeley or Stanford or MIT, you have American kids that are just thinking of crazy ideas and maybe a little bit less focused on hard skills, because that's what the Indians are getting educated for.
Yeah. Do you think that it's also just there's a bigger safety net? It's like a trust fund kid who can have a drug addiction because they can, there's like, they just have a bigger safety net. They're like, dad can get them a job at the investment company if their app fails.
I don't buy that theory because the European Union is even less innovative.
Okay. But they're more regulated, right?
They're more regulated. They have very big safety nets. I would say that they're sort of if India is like a developing city, Europe is like a village in the Cotswolds. It's like, just don't disturb anything. You have the safety net. America still has an adventure built into it. I don't know.
I agree.
I'm not sure if the average American has a bigger safety net than the kids who are already very smart in India.
No, I was referring more to what you mentioned, the kids at Stanford and MIT.
Oh, got it. I would count the public universities in this as well. Nebraska,
Mhm.
one of the smartest kids I know, who was an engineer at SpaceX and decoded an ancient scroll from Herculaneum using machine learning methods that he invented, won $500,000 in prizes, did it in his basement in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Wow.
Computer science student at the University of Nebraska. And
Uh-huh.
it's like that sense of adventure and let's go do this hard thing that's kind of crazy that no one's ever done just because we're not sure if it'll work, and win $500,000 in prizes because it did work by a miracle of his own making.
Uh-huh.
That's the American spirit.
Mhm.
And there were kids at elite universities that tried it as well. He won from
Yeah.
Nebraska.
Yeah, this is what you're trying to get in your magazine across too, is that spirit of adventure and innovation and individualism to a certain extent, I think plays into that. And I do find that I was just talking to somebody about this when I was in post 9/11. I went to Spain. I was in Europe and I was really excited because I hadn't spent much time in Europe, and I grew up with a mom that kind of idealized Europe. It was like Europe is better than America. They know how to live. They just have a bit more sense of culture. And I was very excited to go there. And it was 2005. So they were in peak anti-American sentiment because we had invaded Iraq and they hated America.
Fries.
And it made me, freedom fries. And I found myself, I was very left-wing, anti-Bush, anti-invade Iraq, all of this. And I found myself by the end being like, take off your fucking Nikes, give me your iPhone. Like, it made me I was like waving an American flag. I'm like, you are head to fucking toe America right now. Like, you can tell me all you want about America, but everything that is in your hands and on your body is from our country. And they were not having it. But it did make me realize just how much influence we have and that spirit of innovation. And
do you know Leo Leibovitz?
Who?
Leo Leibovitz.
Sounds familiar.
He's an editor at Tablet.
Oh yeah, of course. Okay.
He wrote an essay in First Things, sort of the ecumenical magazine, and it's one of my favorites ever. It's called A More Perfect Mediocrity, and he's talking about how America, doesn't do anything, doesn't do many things that are just like, much higher standard than anything. So it's like Europe has Gucci and champagne, and he's talking about driving through the Italian countryside trying to find some coffee in the middle of the night. And he's like, we drove for a half hour and then found the best espresso of our lives at like 10:30. In America, every mile there's a 24-hour gas station that has not the best coffee of your life, but it's black, it's hot, and it's available 24/7. And you've got hot food and a shower. And it's like, you don't have that in Europe, but you do have the espresso. And so I think that's almost like the American versus the European mindset. The European mindset is like, let's have, Gucci shoes and an espresso. And the American mindset is, Nike sneakers, black coffee, sort of abundant, maybe not better than Europe, but, better for more people across the board. Because, you go to any state in America, the people in the bottom half are going to be richer than most Europeans. And, they have more disposable income. And that's the mediocrity. It's better for more people, even if Europeans consider it mediocre.
Which they do.
You have French middle class people that can't even afford a car.
Right.
You go to central Missouri, you've got, people that coastal elites would consider hicks driving around in $80,000 trucks.
Yeah.
With a boat.
Yep. Are you dealing with an HMO like I am? It's such a pain in the ass. If I want to get any sort of testing done to ensure I'm making my health a priority, I have to wait weeks for an appointment to see my doctor, then get a referral from him or her, and wait weeks more for an appointment with the specialist I needed to see. Quest simplifies this process. I can purchase my own lab tests online and test for a multitude of health issues I might be concerned about, then take those test results to my doctor, better armed with the information I need. At questhealth.com, you can get hundreds of tests across several different categories, from allergies to heart health, hormones, sexual health. It's summer, guys. Women's health tests for egg quantity, perimenopause, menopause, men's health tests for testosterone, prostate, and so much more. These are lab quality tests, the same ones you'd be given at your doctor's office. Use the affiliate link below for a 25% discount and order your test, then visit a nearby Quest Diagnostics location for sample collection. Get fast, shareable test results online and the option to discuss them at no extra cost with an independent physician who may be able to prescribe treatment. Again, use the affiliate link below for a 25% discount and prioritize your health today with lab work on your terms. It's not on your insurance, folks. It's not on your insurance. I'm excited to announce a new partnership we have with a company I love, Caliber, a strength training and nutrition coaching program that's completely personalized to you. Through their app, you get paired with a personal trainer, an actual person and not an AI bot, on a fitness program and nutrition plan completely customized to your goals, whether it's muscle building, weight loss, ditching the dad bod, or the mom bod in my case. It's much less than it costs to work with a personal trainer at the gym. It's actually been life-changing for me. I literally need somebody who's like, here's what you're doing this week. Here's the targets I want you to hit for eating. The app is incredible. It has videos that show you how to do all the workouts. And you can actually reach out to your coach if you have any questions and send them videos of you doing the workout so they can give you form feedback. I need that accountability. This has been really a game changer. And the fact that it's online makes it so easy for somebody who's busy like me. We've arranged a special deal for our Walk-ins Welcome audience where you get $100 off the first 3 months. It's a really good rate, you guys, for what you're getting. And you get a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not happy with the program. Go to caliberstrong.com/walk-ins or click the link below. That was one of my favorite things you ever wrote, was for Free Press, the
Welcome to the MAGA Hamptons.
Welcome to the MAGA Hamptons. Everyone should go. We'll link it in the description. It's such a great piece. Tell us about that piece and what inspired it.
I had asked Barry Weiss what she wanted me to write for the Free Press, and one of the things that I suggested was sort of an ode to the Lake of the Ozarks, which is a man-made reservoir in central Missouri. And I'd gone there as a kid, and I think it's a really fascinating blend of Midwest and Southern culture. And so I went, I took some photos, and one of the funny things that I mentioned in the piece is that in all the local papers that day, they were saying, mogul Mark Cuban comes to town, billionaire Mark Cuban in Osage Beach. It turned out he was just refueling his jet. So it wasn't even fly over country. It was land and then take back off country.
Oh, geez.
And so I was sort of joking. And I like Mark. I think he's a great character. I really admire what he's done with pro sports. I think that buying the Dallas Mavericks was a great thing to do as a young rich person. And he's grown it, and that's all to his credit. But I thought it was funny that he was using the Lake of the Ozarks that I was trying to sort of extol the virtue of as fly in and fly out country.
Yeah.
And so I wrote this piece called Welcome to the MAGA Hamptons. The Ozarks are a resort community that votes for Trump,
mm-hmm.
which is very, very, very odd.
Mm-hmm.
You go to Hilton Head Island in South Carolina.
Yep.
They're voting for Harris. In the primary, they were voting for Nikki Haley. So it's like, it's that type of politics.
Uh-huh.
It's like, okay, if they're going to be right, they're center right, but they're voting for Democrats. The Hamptons, the actual Hamptons, of course, 80-20.
Uh-huh.
The Lake of the Ozarks.
I wonder what that number is now.
Well, it's interesting. Trump's doing well in New York.
Yeah.
He's been saying since 2015, I'm going to win New York.
It would be amazing if he won New York,
well,
but go on.
In 6 days, do you know where he's going to be?
No.
Madison Square Garden.
Ah.
He's doing a Madison Square Garden rally on Sunday.
Oh, wow.
He's always had the idea of winning New York in his head. He did do better in New York in 2016.
Yeah.
And he did better across all of New England, actually.
Yeah.
Even compared to Romney, who was the governor of Massachusetts. So
back to the Ozarks.
The Ozarks. It's Trump country and it's a resort town. And I think it's just the epitome of middle-class affluence.
Mm-hmm.
You have car dealers, plumbers,
mm-hmm.
electricians,
mm-hmm.
local business owners that have these great houses on the lake
mm-hmm.
and they have boats. And it was one of the few places in America that at the beginning of the COVID lockdowns did not give anything at all.
Remember those
They didn't
videos all
care.
went viral.
They went viral, and that was the first time that most
they
of the
were all just partying,
that-
acting like it wasn't happening,
that
and
was the-
the
that was
rest of America was like, "What is
Yeah,
going on?"
that was the first time that most readers in the New York Times had learned about the Lake of the Ozarks,
Yeah.
so that they could have their 2 minutes hate against it, raging against these people. There was a bar that I went to, where I wrote most of the story over some, tropical drinks, Ozark style, and it's called Backwater Jack's, and they put out what can only be described as like a satirical health notice around Memorial Day in 2020, where they basically said, we'll have alcohol-based hand sanitizer. And of course, everyone's getting hammered, and they have these tiny little bottles of hand sanitizer and people wearing masks on their forehead. It was not only a rejection of the attempted public health measures, it was a complete mockery of them.
Right.
And there was this hilarious story in the New York Times where they found a so-called public health expert in St. Louis who said, we can't prove that there weren't any cases that came as a result of these parties. And it was like, geez, if we're getting that far, it cannot be proved that there weren't any cases of the coronavirus as a result of this party. It's getting pretty desperate. And so I really admired the fact that they resisted. They were doing Trump boat parades the whole summer.
Yep.
And I was like, there's got to be at least one community that that stands up to this. And so I wrote my sort of love letter to the place. This is why you should love the Lake of the Ozarks. This is why I do. This is why it represents a beautiful part of America to me.
I've been to the Ozarks and gone tubing down the river, and I have family that lives kind of in Oklahoma, and they have a farm or a ranch. Actually, it's like everything, and then they have the Ozark place that they go to, and I don't know. It was so much, some of the most fun I ever had. And it was literally just people who would get drunk and build a deck. They're we're going to go build Jim's deck. And they'd all just get hammered and build a deck and then burn plastic chairs. And by the end of the night, there would be people throwing plastic chairs into a bonfire and shooting, raccoons just because they had a migraine or whatever.
I'm always, I sort of joke that, Interstate 70 runs right through Missouri and sort of near there. Above it, they say Missouri. Below it, they say Missouri. Mm-hmm. And so the Lake of the Ozarks is truly the sort of Midwest South border. You realize that you're getting into the South once you hit the Ozarks. It starts, the cornfields start to turn into sort of southern forest. Mm-hmm. It's sort of a spooky area. Mm-hmm. Well, and there was the great show Ozark. That was sort of the other time that people would have learned about it. And the premise of Ozark is that it would be a great place to launder cash because of all the sort of sleazy cash-based businesses by the lake. so the money launderer Marty moves his family down there to try to wash a few $1 million in cartel money by getting involved in these sort of questionable establishments.
How did the piece do?
I think it was one of the best performing free press pieces that entire summer.
Wow.
I got texts from everybody about it. My colleagues started getting emails. You work with this guy?
Were they mad?
No. They were thrilled. They had seen it. They had loved it. I don't think I got any hate mail.
Mm. And where were you?
Which is unusual.
Where were you based at the time? California? Were you in California?
I was living in Austin.
Oh, okay.
I actually drove up to the lake.
Oh.
So I did a little road trip. It was at the end of June in 23. I drove up. I visited another sort of new lake community in Oklahoma that I wanted to learn about, where they've built a new urbanist little area. It looks like the Truman Show.
Oh, wow.
It's on a lake in Oklahoma. And I drove all the way up there. And then I drove back, visited some friends in Dallas and Oklahoma City. But yeah, I'm always eager for road trips. And so
I love road trips.
I insisted on driving up. And honestly, I was raised in the Midwest. 15 hours, nothing. That's a 2-day trip. 12 hours is a 1-day trip.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. When I started my company, the first iteration of it, Phetasy, I didn't have a business plan, which was the probably wrong way to start a company. But I took my company on tour. I was like, I'm not going to wait for everybody to come to me on this website. I'm going to I'm a one-woman brand, and I'm going to go on tour. And so I went on tour, and I drove for 6 months around America in a Jetta. And I went to music festivals, drove all over. That's when I was in Oklahoma, in and out, went to Tennessee. I was everywhere. Sold T-shirts of mine up and down the beaches of Miami. It was like sold T-shirts in Washington State at a festival and got kicked out of the festival for doing it. And we even went up to Canada. It was like just a wild. I love driving around America. It's truly one of my favorite things to do, even still.
It's an important thing to do. I think it's the obligation of intelligent Americans that care about the future of the country to figure out what's going on. And it's also, of course, quite enjoyable. Before the car was invented, people walked around America. Think of how lucky we are to be able to have cheap gas, drive around, sort of be free, have the summer.
Yeah.
I think that everyone should do it as often as they can.
That was one of my problems with the plan I had. It was in 2006, so gas was not cheap. It was like the most expensive gas has ever been in America.
I did a trip in 2021 as well, which was also that was sort of 6-7 months after Biden took office.
Yeah. There's no baby formula. Gas was like $1 million.
I actually drove past the baby formula factory in Michigan during that trip. It was right around the Afghanistan pullout.
Yeah.
Gas was not cheap, but at that point I had just gotten a job. And so I was doing my sort of last hurrah before starting to work full time. And so I drove up around the Great Lakes and camped for 10 days. I met a sort of lazy-eyed fisherman in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan who made trout sausages. And then Gordon Ramsay ended up visiting the trout sausage maker like 2 weeks after I was there.
Gordon Ramsay was in Georgetown last week.
He was at the UT game on Saturday.
He's in town. Yeah, he was up in Georgetown.
Yeah, it's like my teenage heroes, Gordon Ramsay, Bridget Phetasy.
It's all converging. I have a theory that because I've been from the East Coast, graduated from high school in the Midwest, have lived on the West Coast. I was in LA for 16 years. And somebody online the other day was saying they didn't understand. He's like, I don't know my country when it came out that it's basically a coin flip right now, the election. And allegedly. I
believe it.
And I was like, you don't know enough Americans then. I don't understand how you don't see how this is a...
Do you know what one of the things that right-wingers do that really bothers me? They'll say, New York isn't America.
Yeah.
And my response, if New York isn't America, what is?
Right.
Like, it's in many ways, it's all part of America. And if people believe that, if people can't believe that it's a coin flip, then they do need to get out more. But, you have people in, urban Los Angeles that want to believe that there aren't sort of the masses in small towns in Michigan that exist and could put Trump over the edge and did in 2016. And you have people in, the rural part of Michigan that don't want to believe that, there are really enthusiastic people in Los Angeles or Dallas that want to vote for the left.
Yeah.
It's a close country.
It is. I always thought it was funny too. In post 2016, a lot of these celebrities did these kind of like, we need to go look at the creatures who voted for Trump in other countries. And I was like, like Sarah Silverman and all these, I'm like, go to Ventura County. Like, you don't need to leave California. Go to Orange County.
Go to Newport Beach.
Yeah. They would go to like Idaho. I'm like, you don't even want to conceive that these people live in your backyard.
There were like 150 New York Times stories in this Ohio diner.
Yeah.
It's like
we should go to an Ohio diner.
Yeah, let's do it.
We should and do a story.
Right. But I mean, it's like they never go to like an Ohio Chipotle or something. Like, why didn't they go to like Ohio Jimmy John's? Like maybe they'll find some non-cartoon characters there. They were looking for cartoon characters at these diners. In fact, it's funny. Just yesterday Trump was at McDonald's and it's like it was completely surreal, but at the same time, it was like the only normal political restaurant visit that we'd ever witnessed. He sort of puts on the apron, he has his tie.
He's so good.
And he fits in. You saw Biden walk into diners in 2019, and you had these people sitting at booths like, okay, who are you?
Yeah.
And all of these candidates, I'm an Iowan. they show up to the Iowa State Fair and they pretend to enjoy, cooking pork chops or whatnot. They all look super awkward.
Yeah.
The fact that Trump was able to pull off the McDonald's visit,
I
and it
know.
looked like he was having a good time, he's sort of making fun of Kamala. He said, "I've now worked here for 15 minutes, which is 15 minutes more than she ever did."
He's such a troll. He's the funny thing too, somebody, I think, it was someone at National Review, I believe, that Jeff, he wrote an article that was so on point where he said he's such a genius because he basically trolled the entire left-wing media into, "I'm sorry, sir, this is McDonald's."
Yes.
Like, they're just all, he's
Yeah.
like, MSNBC did 18 hours of coverage about this.
Well, and it also goaded the New York Times into doing a ridiculous story this morning where they said that, Trump claims without evidence that Kamala Harris did not work at McDonald's, which of course she offered no evidence that she did work at McDonald's.
Right.
Who is the burden of proof on? And the New York Times story says, her campaign and a friend say that she did. My friend said so.
Yeah.
But of course, the friend was not actually, sourced by the campaign. The friend that Kamala went to high school with in Montreal, in Canada, said, "Yeah, I remember her working at McDonald's around that time." So it's like the fact check is the funniest outcome because now the media is talking about McDonald's and everyone now realizes why Trump made the joke in the first place.
Yeah, he's so good at that. I mean, those pictures were just, I'm sorry, amazing content, know?
I put together, I did these ridiculous photoshops. I'm obsessed with the Just Stop Oil activists who throw soup at the paintings.
Oh, I'm obsessed with them too. I'm so glad they went to jail.
I put the picture of Trump at the drive-through window behind the soup in one of the paintings and put it out and said, they're vandalizing our American cultural heritage, our best artwork. And the picture of him at the Friar, Doug Mills, who is the New York Times presidential photographer who follows Trump everywhere. He's the one who got the shot of the bullet midair.
Oh, right.
He's a brilliant photographer. He's trailed Trump for 9 years now. And he took photos of Trump at the Friar, and the lights under the French fry contraption like illuminated Trump's face. And so you have these photos that look like Renaissance paintings. It was completely ridiculous. And so I put one behind a different painting and said, breaking news, the Italian art authorities have recovered a lost painting believed to be the work of the Italian maestro Raphael, depicting an orange-haired noble cooking for the peasantry. And it was just like, it was completely surreal. I love it so much. You have to wonder whether Harris or Walz will try to pull a fast food stunt over the next 2 weeks.
What's funny about it too is like they're so mad that this was staged.
Right.
And I'm like, all of this shit, we know this is all staged. We don't, literally after the vice presidential debate, and I don't know that anyone caught this really, but it had Tim Walz and his wife went to a New York, we just were watching, like my husband and I were talking, we were watching them go into this New York pizzeria. And they walked up to the counter and they were kind of standing for the cameras and they were ordering their pizza. And then you see them talking. And then they literally just walked out of the restaurant and the CNN like cut away very quickly. I'm like, they didn't even get pizza.
No, well, and there was
we don't eat pizza.
And there was another one where they were in a convenience shop and they get their food and then walk away without paying. And a campaign staffer comes up and is like, "Hold on, we're bringing the credit card." It's just completely ridiculous.
So I mean, we know all this stuff is state. I don't assume just some rando is allowed to drive up to the president.
Are you saying that the president who was shot at twice didn't walk into McDonald's at rush hour and just start working an actual shift? You're saying that this was staged? Are you serious?
It's just so funny to me. I'm like, didn't they just do a whole stage pheasant photo op with Tim where he was shooting pheasants with no guns for a while?
And they allege that one of the pheasants was shot. There was no evidence of that either. I don't buy it. It was completely staged. Did you see Kamala at the convenience station at the convenience store in outside of Philly a few weeks ago?
No.
They cleared out the whole thing, so she's just walking around the empty aisles, picking up the Doritos.
Looting. Just kidding.
Allegedly, there were 4 takes. Allegedly, they had to clear it out and do 4 takes.
Wow.
And of course, what makes the media so mad about Trump doing it is that when he says, I've always wanted to work at McDonald's, he manages to fit in despite being the golden toilet billionaire. Like he literally has like a 75th floor apartment, 10,000 square feet with a golden toilet and the supermodel wife, but he's able to connect with the McDonald's employees and the working class. And this is really what enrages them.
But we also know he fucking loves McDonald's.
He loves it.
Like we don't.
and he
we
has all
know
these.
that.
He has all these accidentally poetic observations when he's at the McDonald's. He said,
"No human hand touches
no human." He's saying he's
because he's a germphobe.
Yes. He's describing how the funnel gets the fries into the bag and it doesn't touch the human hand. Just like, there's no canned way to accidentally say the human hand. He's speaking artistically. It's like, I mean,
we don't deserve
at his rally after the at the McDonald's event, he's explaining what it would look like. He's talking about the different types of electric cars, and Trump has all these very interesting scientific explanations. Human hand is one of them, but he's talking about electric cars, hybrid cars, gas cars, and hydrogen cars, and he's explaining what the remains of a hydrogen car battery explosion victim will look like when the core
when the battery explodes.
And when the coroner calls the wife to come and inspect the remains, it's like
he just goes on these tangents.
It's complete, and yet in his ridiculous sort of explanations, he manages to explain a scientific concept, which is that if a hydrogen battery explodes, it's not going to be big pieces; it'll be little pieces. But one of my favorite ones is he's talking about forest fires. This is while he was president. He's talking about California forest fires, and there's this story, which part of it seems made up. He says that the president of Austria called him and said, "Sir, we are a forest nation." Now the Austrian government denies this, and "Sir, you need to sweep the forests. Sweep those forests." And of course, the visual that you're getting is like going through with a broom,
right.
Trump literally sweeping the forest. But what he's getting at is that you have to clear the debris from dead trees. And California stopped doing that because homeowners objected to it. And so sweep the forest was this sort of ridiculous phrase, but it actually managed to accurately capture the concept. And so Trump doing this in all these poetic ways, it just killed me.
He does this with like the the windmills and stuff. Yeah. And when we were
like, "Honey, I want to watch TV."
He's like, "They're killing the whales." And then I'm from like a whole part of my family's from Rhode Island. Yeah. And all across Rhode Island, there are all these signs like keep it wild, because there were all of a sudden there are all these like marine life washing up on the beaches.
Yeah, it's like he said, "You want to go to a bird cemetery? Check out a wind farm."
Not a lie. No. And so he's like, I'm a single issue after that whole turbine came like ashore in Nantucket or wherever it was, or no, it was Martha's Vineyard.
Wasn't it a whale?
No, there was a wind turbine that fell apart over the summer.
Oh, I see.
And it was all the beaches had to be closed from all the debris from like one or two of the things. I'm like, whose idea was this to put these in? You're telling me that hurricanes are getting stronger because of climate change, and you're also putting these blades in the middle of hurricane. What is and there's all this like
you have to prevent the
coolant
hurricanes
and everything that leaks into
Yeah. No, there's all sorts of sort of second order pollutants from solar and wind, because you can't recycle the materials. You have pretty harsh chemicals.
And he's been very vocal against that. I was like, I think he got more supporters when that stuff washed up on the beach.
Yeah,
I'm like, you don't want to mess with New Englanders and their beach time. They have horrible winters.
You have the turbine washing up, the migrants landing. They got rid of the migrants much faster than the turbine, I guess.
Yeah, that was another thing I learned, I think, I didn't have Trump derangement syndrome. I was pretty lucky to be getting it was like getting caught. I was getting caught in the crossfire of the culture wars at that moment, which gave me a lot of perspective. And I felt like I had no way to discern something that the left did. I'm like, is this just him being ridiculous? Is this something the left does that the right that now they're saying is bad? And I really looked to kind of never Trumpers in that moment, at that moment in time, to kind of, because they were still kind of calling balls and strikes of like, oh, this is just the left-wing media accusing the right of doing something that they do all the time versus no, this is something, this is a norm that he's kind of violating, that we don't, whatever. And so I felt like,
I mean, now they're trying to say that a photo op is some sort of like illicit campaign tactic.
I know, it's crazy.
It's like,
So I did learn, like, even with the migrant stuff, I learned that a lot of like what we're dying laughing about, the way that he speaks, is you'll find out like 2 years later it was true. It's the way that he was saying it.
They have to focus on the ridiculousnthat of it.
Like, we're gonna find out they were eating the cats eventually.
I think that there's pretty solid evidence that they were hunting geese. I think that the cats thing was probably an apocryphal story. There were multiple recorded 911 calls of residents saying like they've got geese, one each. And there, the geese thing, I do believe. The cats, probably not. It was funny. My favorite comment on the Springfield situation was Marianne Williamson. I'm not sure if you've ever had her on the podcast.
No, I would love to.
She's like the sort of spiritual author.
Of course, yeah.
She said,
Course in Miracles or whatever.
Exactly. She said, don't shame Americans for being concerned about this. There are Haitian voodoo practices, and that was sort of funny because she ran for president as a Democrat. She's basically telling people voodoo is a real thing.
Yeah.
So.
And I would know because I'm the queen of woo.
Right. She does white voodoo. Publishing sort of spiritual books. My favorite other thing on the McDonald's, to close on that, someone tweeted out this Andy Warhol quote, which I just thought was amazing. It's a longer quote, but the gist of it is that Warhol says that the image of the president is so important for morale. And what he would do if he were president was he'd write a list of all the things that people are embarrassed to do, that they should not be embarrassed to do, and go do all of those things on television. And so working in a fast food window, people should not be embarrassed to work an entry-level job at McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's. And Trump showing up in his suit, his same long red tie, putting on the apron and doing the work that people are embarrassed to do but shouldn't be embarrassed to do. It was Warhol's prophecy come true. Can you imagine Hillary getting in there and doing it? It's like, no, she's too controlled.
Yeah.
Wouldn't want to be embarrassed. Trump embraces it. So.
He's also very good at that kind of showmanship. He comes from television, for reality television. So he knows better than anyone how to work that camera and work those opportunities. And I think politicians are particularly, I don't know, they feel like they're better. They're more used to dealing with people who have money and trying to get money. And then just repeating talking points wherever they are for whatever the polls tell them. Yeah. They're not as like quick on their feet as he is.
That may be one of Trump's advantages at this point, is that everyone with money either hates him or is kind of wary of him. And the people, throughout the country without money, without status, are the ones who really love him.
But there are a lot of people with money who love him or like him.
They like him, yes. Love is a different thing.
I mean,
though.
He's got Elon behind him. He's got people who are I don't think most of the like Silicon Valley has come out in support of him.
It's not most.
It's a lot of them though.
It's some big names. It's
I bet Zuckerberg's voting for Trump.
I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if Zuckerberg votes for Trump. I don't think that he's ever getting into another political mess. I think he learned his lesson, where he tried to do what he thought was the right thing in 2016 and got punished by the Dems for it, because even though he basically said, all right, we're stopping Russia from buying these $200,000 in advertisements, he then got blamed for Trump. Got taken to the doghouse by the Dems. Now he's since grown the hair out, built up some muscle. Started doing jujitsu,
and now he's fuck you.
And then he wrote this letter a few weeks ago, basically to Jim Jordan on the House Judiciary Committee, apologizing for, the Hunter Biden laptop stuff and some of the moderation stuff that they had done from 2016 to 2020, and said, we're never doing that again. We regret it. We regret being led like that by the government, basically admitting that the government had demanded censorship and that he at the time decided to comply and that he would not do it again. I would not be surprised if he votes for Trump, but I mean, still, if you take out Elon, the vast majority of Silicon Valley money is still going to Kamala.
Really?
And I suspect that it's even the majority with Elon, which is
but
saying
hasn't
something.
like Mark Andreessen and like all the I don't know. It seems like a lot of those guys have come out in support of what's his name, Michael or Sachs. Naval, I think, has not openly supported him, but
I don't think Naval is like a donor. You have Sachs, Chamath. You have a bunch of those. You have a bunch of those characters. I just mean that it is still the case that Silicon Valley is overwhelmingly liberal.
Okay.
I think the difference today, that is a huge difference compared to 16 or 20, is that there is zero punishment for coming out as a Trump supporter. I think that was, I mean, you'll remember what happened to Peter Thiel.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Thiel, who's a chairman of Palantir, started Founders Fund.
I'll be at Hereticon.
I'll be there too.
Yay! So excited.
Peter in 2016 wrote $1 million check to Trump and spoke at the RNC, and he gives this great speech about stagnation, and it was memorable for a lot of people because at the end of the speech he said, I'm proud to be gay, proud to be a Republican, but more than that, proud to be an American. And the RNC claps for this openly gay guy who's sort of showing it off. And he just got taken to the cleaners in Silicon Valley. It was like, people were brutal. And I believe, and there's a lot of evidence for this, that at the tail end of the Obama administration, they sicked the regulatory agencies on him because he was a big federal contractor and had decided to start speaking up. They suddenly started investigating stuff. And Peter was in a party of one at that point.
Right.
He was the only one.
And now they're doing that to Elon, it seems like a little bit.
I think, well, they need Elon a lot. They need Elon because of SpaceX. You have things like the Federal Aviation Administration being slowpokes with paperwork for SpaceX. In Delaware, they're trying to steal a bunch of his money, give it to the lawyers who sued him. I mean, they're definitely doing it against Elon. My favorite one is the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ, which is sort of ground zero for woke enforcement. Said, that they need to be hiring more illegals at Starbase in South Texas. They don't have enough illegal immigrants working for them. And Elon says, I was under the impression that we could only hire American citizens because this is very sensitive defense work, which of course it is. The defense regulations say if you're working on stuff that's weapons, which a rocket is a weapon, you're only allowed to have U.S. citizens or permanent residents working on it. So you have to have a green card or U.S. citizenship. And in many cases, you have to undergo a security clearance so that the government can suss you out. So that's the military. The DOJ at the same time is saying, you only hiring U.S. citizens means you're discriminating against illegals. It's just crazy.
You can't win.
You can't win. And so that one, completely vindictive. The thing in Delaware, completely ridiculous. They're suing to take back tens of billions of dollars that Elon had been paid by Tesla shareholders. But anyway, Peter was the only one. I would say that there were almost none in 2020 that were public donors. You had a few, Doug Leone, Sequoia. And 2024, you cannot count them all on two hands.
Right.
Of big names who are supporting him big time. And that's a huge change. It's still the case, though, that I think that Silicon Valley is more or less 20% conservative, if that.
I still, though, think there has been somebody was quote tweeting my article that I have going bonkers right now that I wrote about, like the conflicted kind of confused mind of a suburban voter, independent voter, where you're like, I don't really want Kamala to win, but can I pull the lever for Trump? And I was writing about my own internal conflict on this, and many women I know in particular, and men. But this was more specific to just my own experience that I like from my mentions has resonated with many people and also makes a lot of people very angry. And there was Megan McArdle. Let me look at what she said exactly, because she quote tweeted me, and she said, containment has failed. She quote tweeted my quote from my article, which was, I don't want Kamala to win, but I don't know if I can vote for Trump either. So I feel like a coward. By default, I don't want Trump to lose, but I don't want to vote for him either. And then there's other stuff in the article, obviously. And she said, containment has failed on Trump, and not for want of gatekeepers anathematizing him. It's no longer unthinkable for a certain kind of person to admit they're rooting against Harris. Lots of possible explanations, including that the emotional fervor of the resistance was simply unsustainable over a full decade.
Yeah. Well, and I also think, most technology people would not have told you in 2016 that that President Obama and his administration was actively hostile to capitalism and to entrepreneurship. I think that you would be hard pressed to find. You need to find people that are really dishonest, like Reid Hoffman or whatnot, to tell you that President Biden has been good for entrepreneurship. I mean, they have crushed so much of what's made Silicon Valley prosperous, and a lot of it is killing people or just vindictive, and a lot of it targeted against specific industries where they made the mistake of speaking out.
How have they crushed it?
Well, I mean, for one, the FTC has basically stopped all sort of merger and acquisition activity in tech. So it used to be the case that if you built a successful startup, you've got revenue, you've got super talented engineers, a company like Adobe or Facebook could buy your company, and it'd be a huge outcome for the founders of the company and for the investors. And today they've basically ground that to a halt.
Why?
Because under their theory, under the FTC's Lena Khan, they say that mergers and acquisitions are what big tech companies use to try to crush competition.
Oh, so it's like,
I'll give you an example. Adobe, which makes great software, Final Cut, or is Final Cut Apple? Premiere Pro. That's the Adobe video editor. They make Acrobat PDFs. They make InDesign, which is what we use to design the magazine. And it's like a lot of design software is done in Adobe. And they wanted to buy Figma, which is a software design company that's very popular in Silicon Valley. You use it to design iPhone interfaces. You could use it to design advertisements. They wanted to buy it for $20 billion. This is a company with hundreds of millions in revenue, which means it's definitely not worth $20 billion. But they wanted to buy it for $20 billion because they have hundreds of talented engineers, and this company is like a rocket ship. The Biden DOJ shut it down on the basis that there would be less competition in the design space. Now, today, it's the same as it was before, but the employees at Figma don't get access to the stock that they've worked hard for. The founders don't get access to the money that they've worked hard for.
Why not?
Because the Adobe wasn't allowed to purchase it. So if Adobe purchases it for $20 billion, then they purchase all of the stock.
Right.
And so that means that the early employees get their payday. Right. It means that the founders get their payday. It means that the investors get their payday. And so right now it's basically in limbo. A few months ago, Figma had to start raising prices. They're not making enough money.
Right.
And so, the Biden theory is that it's better if this company does worse as long as they're not part of a bigger company. Because they'd rather have sort of so-called competition than they would have good outcomes.
Right.
Here's another example. There's a company called Illumina. Illumina does genome sequencing. They design the machines where they test genomes. They had started a company called Grail, and they spun it out. And Grail actually made the test that the doctors use. And so Grail was a separate company, and Grail would be the ones to provide the hardware to the doctors. The doctors would take the tests, and then they'd mail it to Illumina. Years later, Illumina wanted to buy back Grail, and the FTC determined this would be an illegal vertical integration.
What?
Based on the idea that you shouldn't own both the machine that does the test and the test itself, even though at one point it had been the same company, and they just wanted to buy it back. And this basically means that people cannot get access to the best genome tests. And so under this theory, which is very popular with people on the left, and sometimes the populist right even, it's better to have separate companies, even if that means worse outcomes for patients or worse outcomes for everybody. And so, the tests are more expensive now. It's harder to coordinate them. Illumina wanted to deploy all of this nationwide, but under this theory, you shouldn't be allowed to buy the company because you need to have as many companies as possible, even if that's bad for consumers.
Are you tired of wading through media misinformation, trying to figure out a news outlet's spin or bias on any given story? Ground News is the solution you didn't know you needed. Ground News is the most complete news comparison app. It lets you make sense of the news on your own terms by letting you easily compare how a story is covered by different sources across the political spectrum and around the world. Compare any news article you want, filtering it by bias, left, right, or center, by location, so you can understand how news is being covered around the world, and by time, knowing when the story was first reported and how the reporting has changed. I'm obsessed with these guys. I love their blind spot report because you don't think you have blind spots, and then you see this report and you're like, oh, yeah, I had no idea that even happened. Start seeing the news more clearly, find out the truth, and stay up to date with what's going on in the world with the Ground News app. Use our affiliate link below to get 15% off. That's Ground News. Use the link below to get 15% off. If you love Watkins Welcome, please consider becoming a subscriber to Phetasy.com to show your support. Phetasy relies on its supporters to continue creating the content you love, so if you can, please support us. It truly keeps the lights on and the content churning. Churning? And it keeps me going. You also get a multitude of exclusive subscriber content, so come join us. Go check it out. Phetasy.com. Phetasy.com. What's your kind of good faith interpretation of this argument?
The good faith interpretation, I'll give my response to it. The good faith interpretation is that Adobe buys Figma, the design software.
Is it supposed to be monopolies? They're against monopolies?
Yeah, they're against what they call monopolies. Mm-hmm. But of course, here's a great example. Facebook bought WhatsApp, and WhatsApp was only a team of 13 people when they bought it for multiple $1 billion. In fact, it was an absurd acquisition. It was like tens of billions of dollars that they bought WhatsApp for. Now there are competitors to WhatsApp. Facebook happens to run WhatsApp really well, but the thing with most acquisitions is that the big tech company actually doesn't run it as well as a competitor could, and so that creates room for competition. So I'll give you a great example. Microsoft bought LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. Does anyone think that LinkedIn is like this great product that's like essential and that Microsoft shouldn't have been allowed to purchase it because it's too much of a monopoly? Mm-hmm. No, it's like now you have X, you have all these different things. So the steelman of their theory is that Adobe buys Figma and now it's the one big company that makes design software. Whereas my retort is that as soon as they buy Figma, all of the Figma employees are getting their $20 billion in stock payments and investors. And then there's going to be immediate hunger to build a new design thing to compete against Adobe, because Adobe will not be as good at running it.
Right.
And so the Lena Khan theory of the universe is that big tech are evil geniuses. But of course, if big tech are evil geniuses, why is it that Intel is at an all-time low? Oh, it's because NVIDIA came along. Now NVIDIA is worth $3 trillion. Mm-hmm. You have competition, and people are always very good at creating stuff. The effect of the Biden policy is that entrepreneurs are never allowed to get their payday, because unless they can take it public, which is very expensive, they just can't get bought by anybody. Right. And so it depends whether you think it's more important that there be separate companies or that entrepreneurs be allowed to get their billions that they earned.
Right.
Which are right now basically stuck. Here's another example. There was a company called Axon, which is it's basically a monopoly on police body cameras. On tasers. Mm-hmm. They wanted to buy a body camera company that was about to go bankrupt. So here's the question. Do you let it go bankrupt, or do you let a bigger company buy it? The Biden theory is it's better for it to go bankrupt, because at least then you have competition, which of course is a retarded theory. If it goes bankrupt, you don't have competition. Right. Then someone else is going to buy it for much less. And so they're too ideological. And this is one of the things that's the toughest for Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, a lot of the compensation is based on stock. Mm-hmm. And you have to have what's called an exit in order to get that stock. A bigger company has to buy it. You have to take it public, something like that. And if you crush one of those options, then you're basically, preventing people from getting the money that they earned. Mm-hmm. And so it's terrible for employees in Silicon Valley. And that's why a lot of people are aggrieved at Biden.
Got it. Interesting. I mean, I don't, as somebody who's an independent contractor, it's been horrible.
Yeah.
You know, it started in California with like all the regulations
Yeah,
there. They've been trying to take it to PRO Act. Then they've actually just
The
moved
PRO
it.
Act is insane.
It's insane. And then they couldn't pass it. So they just passed it through the labor department.
Yeah.
And they basically just I don't even know what's happening with it, because I know there's a lot of lawsuits against it, essentially, because it shouldn't be constitutional.
There's going to be a case at the Supreme Court in this upcoming term where some of the parties that are together, SpaceX and Trader Joe's, have teamed up against the National Labor Relations Board. They're basically going to decide whether this sort of crony National Labor Relations Board, which is sort of the union bullying organization, is even constitutional. And almost nobody believes that the 6-3 conservative Supreme Court is going to uphold this. The NLRB, the president has no power to remove anyone from the commission. And so you basically have this star chamber that is totally immune from democracy, that's deciding which companies should be punished. It's insane. It's autocratic. It's authoritarian. And the president has absolutely no recourse. And so the Supreme Court does not like so-called independent entities where they're insulated from democracy, where you basically get to have this separate dictatorship that's allegedly upholding union rights, but it's actually just bullying companies.
We had that with public health in Los Angeles. The woman who is on the she looks like she's a keeper of the crypt, and she was making all of these decisions.
Maybe she's hunting geese in Los Angeles.
She was what was her name? Herrera or something like that. She was on the whatever, like, commission or whatever, what was it? The board, or like the council, LA Council or something.
Probably the public health commission.
It's like you can't get rid of them.
Yeah.
They aren't even elected. I don't even know how you go about getting rid of them. And they're theirs forever. And
this was the thing that
what was her name?
This was a conflict with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, which is the bureau that Liz Warren created when she was still a professor at Harvard with Obama. And basically the way Congress tried to write the law was that future Congresses are not allowed to change the funding of the agency, which is just like, now they were doing it because they knew that the Republicans were going to win big time and try to defund it. And so they tried to write this illegal clause where we get money forever. And Trump very famously fired the CFPB director, and they tried to show up to work the next day and turned into like a hero on MSNBC for saying I refuse to be fired, which was just a joke. But it was like, that's the real theory, is that like the CFPB and the NLRB, these spooky bureaucratic agencies, should be the ones to rule our society, even if the Republicans win.
Right.
Which is just outrageous.
Yeah, no.
It's just outrageous.
That is outrageous.
And I accept that when Biden wins, he gets to instruct his people what to do. But then I get to campaign against it, and I get to say, this is destroying the economic sector. This is destroying the ability for entrepreneurs to make money. And you're terrible, and we're going to replace you. But their logic then is that even if the Republicans win, even if Trump wins, that the bureaucrats who are holdovers should still be in charge.
Yeah, that's like all the independent contractor laws and everything that are so bananas. I mean, it will destroy the entertainment industry in California if they do what they're trying to do, because they couldn't get AB5 had so many carve outs that it essentially should have been completely overturned. And
California is the state that's most captured by special interest. I don't know if you saw the law that they did a few weeks ago.
No.
They amended the state alcohol code in such a niche degree that it would specifically allow
Gavin Newsom to drink wine during a pandemic.
No, it's even worse. It's even worse. There were regulations that basically exempted the restaurant that he owns in San Francisco. No, they're exempting the VIP lounge at the Chase Center from the alcohol restrictions so that they can serve alcohol from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. instead of having to close up at 2 a.m. like everybody else.
What?
Yeah, it's just NBA privilege. So the high flyers at the NBA games get to stay later for alcohol than everyone else in the state. And this is something that was passed by the California legislature.
It got passed?
It got passed. And it's like...
Californians are so dumb.
But they have a full-time legislature with the highest paid legislature in the world, in the U.S. at the state level. They're full-time politicians, every one of them. and you have all these special interests in California. California is the size of a pretty large country, 40 million, all these special interests. There was another funny, there are all these funny regulations that have amazing carve outs. There was some regulation where the guy who owns, dozens and dozens of Panera franchisees in California had been one of Newsom's largest donors. And then it ended up being the case that one of these new labor laws excluded restaurants that serve baked bread. Most restaurants don't serve baked bread like a bakery. Panera does. And it was like, oh, wow, why is that? Why are they getting a carve out to this extremely oppressive, like, minimum wage law that you're trying to put all these small businesses out? And it's like, California is the special interest state. Newsom is, pretty talented guy. But he is like, has to sort of play along with all of these special interest, the teacher unions, the entertainment, big tech.
I got an email from Cast and Crew, and it was about 3 or 4 months ago, talking about how I again don't know where this stands because I haven't been keeping up on it because I don't live in California anymore. But they were saying that because they couldn't really get it's almost like a backdoor entryway for them to enforce AB5. So now they're saying no one can get paid by a loan out, which is how all of Hollywood runs on loan outs. Like everybody.
Explain that to me.
So everybody basically, instead, everyone has a loan out corporation, generally like an S Corp or something, like actresses.
They loan their time to these other companies? Or?
No, I guess it's just slang for like an S Corp or one of these corporations, this structure where you're essentially, instead of getting paid as an employer, you're getting paid as an independent you're getting paid as an entity.
Okay,
so when I was on Curb Your Enthusiasm, for example, they paid Phetasy Inc. They didn't pay.
Got it.
You basically become a company.
Was that the MAGA hat episode?
Yes.
I love that one.
So and it's a way that production companies don't have to pay payroll taxes for somebody who's working for a day. And I don't, and then, I go and I pay my taxes, but you can't write off anything if you're.
And it was basically the unions of the organized labor industry in California that had pushed this, along with the taxi drivers.
Yeah.
The people that they wanted to go after were Uber and Lyft drivers.
Mm-hmm. And then they got a carve out. Well, they didn't.
No, they didn't get a carve out. They defeated the ballot measure.
They defeated the ballot measure.
Because Uber and Lyft put notifications on California Uber and Lyft users' phones reminding them to vote against this or your product will be shut down. I love it. Coinbase did an advertisement warning people about voting for people that want to ban Coinbase. It's like, why shouldn't they?
Yeah.
It was insane. And it was because the hotel lobby in Los Angeles is very powerful. They have a lot of money. And they wanted to go after any sort of labor industry where you have lots of workers, but they're not unionized.
Right.
My mom is a public school teacher. She's in her very last year. She's going to retire at the end of this year. She's never joined the union. She gets all the benefits of the union, but she does not pay them the dues because Iowa stripped all the teacher unions of their power many years ago. And so every year they send a sort of new, more diverse person to try to berate her into joining the union. She absolutely refuses because what do they do with the money? They give it to Democrats. And my mom did not consent to that. Mm-hmm. She does not consent to her money that's allegedly being used to advocate for her interests as a teacher to just be donated to Democrats. It's money laundering.
Interesting.
And so it was all the unions in California, hotel, taxi, sanitation, teachers. The teacher union in California is immense. Yeah,
huge. And terrifying.
So that was sort of the AB5 thing. That one was defeated. There have been all these insane things in California that the voters have actually voted against. Mm-hmm. It's in the legislature that they're super left wing. Mm-hmm. When California voters get to vote on actual issues rather than candidates, they'll choose the more center or right wing option. California's voted multiple times to uphold the ban on affirmative action.
Yeah,
affirmative action is not allowed at California public universities. And they're 45% Asian.
Yeah.
That's what happens when affirmative action is not allowed. 45% Asian. It's like little Taiwan at UCLA.
Yeah.
And they're not allowed to discriminate against Asians, and so they don't.
Wasn't that the joke for a long time? University of Caucasians lost among Asians.
I never heard that. That's good. That's good. And the legislature in California, which is ultra left, captured by special interests, Newsom is the governor, tried multiple times to instate affirmative action, and the voters voted against it by 60-40 in the same year that they voted for Biden by 60-40 as well. And so
Right.
it's like, what California is a highly Democrat state. It's not necessarily a hugely left-wing populist. They hate Republicans, but if given the chance to vote for Democrats and right-wing ideas like banning affirmative action, then it's
Right.
like, sign me up. They'll vote for Joe Biden and, pro-Joe Biden, anti-affirmative action. That's like the sort of median Californian.
Yeah, but it still is completely captured.
It's captured at the state level for sure.
Yeah.
But the ballot initiatives aren't, because
Right.
people get to vote on those.
Right. Yeah. Your magazine, you have the second
We just announced the second one today.
one.
It's coming out. It's going to be printed next week, probably.
What's the theme of do you have a theme for each one?
We do. The second one is called America Punk.
Thank you for doing that, by the way.
Thank
When
you.
people don't do that with magazines, it like stresses me out. I'm like,
Giving it a name?
huh? Giving it a theme.
Giving it a theme.
I'm always like, hey guys, they're like, you're on deadline for your column. I'm like, what's the theme? And they're like, I'm like,
Yeah.
I need a theme.
I would say the theme is slightly tenuous on this one.
Mm.
Not all of the articles are connected by it, but we sort of decided that the core articles in every issue are going to be connected by a theme.
Okay.
There's always going to be some odds and ends. America Punk is basically, we were thinking about what are some of the big problems in the media, and that it's difficult to portray America as like a uniquely cool thing, and you can't do it in like a stereotypical or cliche way. And so we wanted to think of a new sort of aesthetic genre to celebrate America, and we were like, what about punk? We
Mhm.
love all these like old punk album covers. I love like punk music, Blink-182 and Yellow Card, and I was like, what if we just do something that sort of celebrates scrappiness and rebellion and going against the grain, throwing something together. So that, the cover that we have is the photo of Earthrise, the very famous photo of Earth taken from the moon during one of the Apollo missions, with like magazine letters spelling.
Allegedly. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't think that one's even a legend. Do the moon truthers believe that we ever went anywhere near the moon?
I don't think so.
Interesting. Okay.
Do they? You're like,
Follow that shit.
I thought you were a moon truther.
It's like, how do we get the
Just
photo?
kidding.
How do we get the photo of the Earth from the moon? How would we have even
I
known
want to
what it
know.
looked
Do they
like?
know that? Do they? That's a good question.
Like, it's pretty amazing that the first photo of Earth from the moon perfectly matched all the maps for 500 years or whatnot.
Yeah.
It's like, we got it right. So anyway, so it has the magazine letters, which is sort of celebrating this great feat going to the moon, along with the scrappiness of the magazine letters. And so we talk about people that are scrappy themselves, but that are fighting, building things. We profiled a founder in San Francisco who's building a genomics company.
Mhm.
She wants to help everyone have a healthy baby, and the
Oh.
media hates her for it because they basically say she's a eugenicist. And she
Ah.
says, my mom suffered from chronic illness.
Mhm.
Do you believe that people deserve chronic illness? Do you believe that people should be forced to live with debilitating diseases? What if we can catch some of these and help everyone have a healthy baby and reduce infant mortality? And of course, the natural reaction from the tech magazines was like, she's evil, she's a Nazi, why would you do this? And she says, why are you so mean? Do you wish to inflict suffering on people? What if people want this?
But isn't this the whole party that's like, don't have kids?
Yeah, that's another part of it, is that helping people have a healthy baby would also, decrease the fear that people have associated with giving birth or having children, because it's like, if we can, there are a lot of what they call monogenic diseases caused by a single gene that can be very, very easily called out. A lot of these cause most of the infant death and maternal death during childbirth, basically.
Yeah.
What kind of misanthrope would be against trying to cut down on dying during childbirth? It's like,
Mhm.
imagine if you had activists that were actually, we do have activists that are against vaccinating children to try to prevent them from dying of needless diseases, but it's like, so
Like they exist.
they do.
What's interesting?
Although what's sort of doubly interesting about this is that with the measles vaccine, if a kid doesn't have the measles vaccine, they can infect another baby. It's a third
Right.
person, and so people actually have more grounds to be upset about people not vaccinating kids for measles than they do about someone using a genome test, because it truly doesn't affect you. It's like if someone else wants to test the embryos for debilitating diseases, it's their business, not yours. It truly doesn't affect you. But people have still riled themselves up about it.
It's strange to me that that's considered eugenics, but like abortion isn't. I don't know. That's like that's weird to me. I don't know how to square that in my mind.
I think the only philosophies.
How do they square that?
Cognitive dissonance. One person is considered right wing because she's like a scientist, and she's like a 5-foot Arab woman. It's like she's not some lunatic. I think the only philosophies that are sort of sound are either freedom or not freedom, and so it's like you either have like a ultra freedom policy where abortion and genome testing are both allowed, or you have the sort of paternalistic, pro-life and against genetic exploration. But I think the things in between are all getting sort of muddled.
Mm-hmm. And what is your overall? How many people work for you for the magazine?
One other person.
Oh, okay. It's very, very.
We have an intern as well.
Okay.
It's 1.5.
1.5.
Although maybe
that's a lot of work for 3 people.
Yeah. So I designed the magazine myself this time.
Okay.
I did all the typesetting. I did the cover, which was an experiment, but I think it turned out quite well. We're going to grow the team a bit, but for now, yeah, it's a lean and mean operation, and we contract out some of the articles to people that contribute. So we pay those people by the article instead of having them on staff.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I loved your manifesto at the beginning.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're going to have is a manifesto for each magazine.
Oh, cool.
So this is the manifesto of the first magazine and of the whole sort of magazine project. Each magazine from now on is going to have a manifesto. And so we wrote the manifesto, America Punk, sort of talk about what we mean by that phrase, what we mean by, America is punk, by America is rebellious, America is the naughty kid. We were born in a rebellion. And so the New Needs Friends was the first one.
Did you write this manifesto?
Yeah, I wrote that with Ginevra, who's the other full-time person.
Okay, yeah, it's so good. I love it, and I love that it's the Theodore Roosevelt speech, because that is a quote that I have lived by since getting caught in the crossfire of the culture wars.
Yep.
Because you hear a lot. It's someone in my position too, where I'm like, I don't know, they both kind of suck. It's like you hear constantly, and I have to just be like, whatever, you're not in the
and that's basically the problem that we identify in much of the press, is that they want to be the critics. They want to be like French food critics. They never want to have any skin in the game. And so we're the magazine about technology that sort of appreciates what goes into building this stuff. We're not trying to be sideline critics. We're trying to appreciate the craft. People spend their lives building these things. And so, we're talking about those products. We're talking about those products with love and admiration for the process that goes into them.
Yeah.
And the many, many decades of labor.
And I could talk to you for so long, but we're going to run out of time. So, I have so many questions. Like, you've overcome so much in your own life that you've talked about, very openly. You've written about it and in beautiful ways, and for the Free Press too, right? Or on your Substack.
No, there was
one on Free Press, right?
There was one on the Free Press about my farm.
Mm-hmm. And then stuff on do you still have your own Substack, or are you not doing that anymore?
I'm not publishing anything, but I haven't taken it down or anything.
Oh, okay. What do you like advice do you have for young people who are or anyone really, just in the face of adversity, and how have you kind of picked yourself up? And
yeah, I mean, so I suppose it might be worth giving people a bit of context on what we're talking about.
I always leave it up to the person.
So when I was 14, my dad took his own life.
Mm-hmm.
He was a veteran. He had struggled a lot with both deployment and with the return to civilian life, which is something that a lot of people in the veteran community struggle with. He'd always had, I think, a latent mental health issue, but it really came to a head after he had returned. In a sort of morbid irony, now he was working at the Department of Veterans Affairs, helping other veterans who were much older and much frailer than he was access benefits to which they were entitled. He told me a story about a Japanese American veteran who was 101 when he visited Bruce, my dad, at the VA in Salt Lake City, and his daughter had brought him in to speak for him. He had survived the Bataan Death March, which was, it is what it sounds like. It was a forced march of tens of thousands of American POWs in Bataan in, it's either the Philippines or Indonesia. I forget which one. The majority of POWs had died on this march. It was sort of the epitome of Japanese imperial cruelty to prisoners of war. And this guy, when he was 17 or 18, had been interned by the United States with his family at the beginning of the war. So in 1941, this man was basically sent to a concentration camp in California because he was Japanese. He was let out in 43 or 44 and enlisted in the army and fought for the United States and was almost murdered by the Japanese.
Jesus.
And, if that doesn't give you a sense of what these people are fighting for and how much America inspires people, then there's nothing that will. And so Bruce saw a lot of this stuff up front. The crisis of the VA in counseling veterans, and in the end he succumbed to what so many do. We've had by a significant margin more veteran suicides than deaths in the whole war on terror. More people who fought in the war on terror killed themselves than were killed by the enemy.
Yeah.
So it's this massive crisis. Bruce died in 2014 when I was in the 8th grade, and my twin brother Jackson and I insisted on going to school the next day. Bruce's suicide was on a Thursday, and my mom, brilliant as she is, told us to go to the grocery store, which was sort of down the street, and hang out, and had a family friend come pick us up. And we had no idea what was going on. She had organized everything. She had called the police. She had gotten rid of us. She had mobilized her friends. And so we went home a few hours later. And what was done. Her strength was something else. So Jackson and I went to school the next day. We went for bagels in the morning, but then we went to school. And we both hated the idea of being treated differently, or being being the kid that people are sort of looking out for like a little sick puppy. And our insistence was always, nothing that happens today is going to take away tomorrow. It's our choice to be strong and to be resilient. Did you ever see Dear Evan Hansen, either the musical or the movie?
No.
So it's probably too much to get into, but there's this scene in the movie version of it and in the musical as well, where the sister of a kid who's killed himself in high school is walking through the school aisles, and she can sort of tell that she's basically a mannequin in the front store window, and no one wants to be a mannequin in the front store window.
Right.
And so Jackson and I insisted on going to school. We were normal. And in 2022, Jackson had a climbing accident in Switzerland. So he'd been over there for a while. He had fallen in love with sort of climbing and adventuring, and he had a bad day. In August of 22, he slipped. It was a fatal accident. The U.S. Embassy in Switzerland called us 2 days later. I had, by a small miracle, flown home the night before, very spontaneously, and so was with my mom the next morning when the phone call came at 7 a.m. And that happening when I was 22 was a lot different than what had happened when I was 14, because I wasn't responsible for anything when I was 14. My mom had sprung into action. She had done everything. And it was like she had ripped through this morbid checklist of things that you have to do before any of the four of us had even gotten home.
Yeah.
And that was my job in August of 22, was to do the checklist myself. My mom was in no position to do it. And so that was my duty, to take pictures of birth certificates and dental records. It's not a checklist that I recommend anyone ever have to, take part in, but it was the obligation at the time. And so my my advice to people is that I think that they should remember their obligations to others. And it may not be very good advice for people that feel that they're going through adversity. You have an obligation to be strong for those around you.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some times when you can be taken care of, and that's fine. But I think that people should remember that the reason why they get taken care of is because there are people that are willing to be strong around them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is important to, do the things that you like, and look out for others, even in situations, because it's rarely just you that's going through something.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if it's family related or, a colleague or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I have amazing colleagues, and, they were all looking out for me. But the thing I didn't want was, 2 months later for there to be, lower expectations on a project
Right.
or something.
Right.
And I did take some time off, and then I got back into it. And I think it's really important for people to, just keep coming back to this idea of strength and the obligation to try to find it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, there are other people who are having a harder time than you. And I think that can really sort of become manifest to people when they're going through a really rough time, to try to find the strength, because it'll teach them how to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's never just once that someone has a really bad day, week, or year.
Yeah. I'm so sorry for all your loss.
Thank you.
What is your biggest defect of character?
My bluntness.
Mm.
I can't pretend to like people.
Oh, okay.
And that has downsides.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I cannot feign interest. It's pretty difficult. But that's probably also a virtue, because there are no mysteries,
Yeah.
shall we say.
What's your biggest asset other than your resilience?
I think it's probably my way with words. That's always been a big asset.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have I'm reliable. I think that's important. I always, I aspire to be the person on like a road trip or a get together that's sort of the hinge and relied upon for many things, rather than the glutton in the corner.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's an asset. I'm a good host.
Is there a way for people to get the older issues of the magazine if they subscribe?
So if they subscribe, they'll get like the Stripe payment page, and they can just click one button to add the first issue.
Okay.
To just order it as a one-off. But from now on, all of the subscriptions will be for issues 2 and going forward or whatnot.
Okay.
So once a new issue comes out, the subscription changes.
Okay. Got it. All right. So get on that. So where can they go subscribe?
arenamag.com.
Okay.
Or arenamagazine.com.
All right.
We own both domains.
Oh, well, you know what domain I own?
Phetasy.com.
crymorelib.com.
Crymorelib, really? Are you using it for anything?
We've had it forever. I bought it as a joke in 2016.
You need to put like an animated Trump gif of his face at that one debate where he's like,
I think I just might put a picture of him in the McDonald's drive-thru on it. This is a landing page.
I'll make the page for you. Just
Will
get a
you?
static hosted image. It'll just be Trump at the drive-thru.
My husband's like, what are we going to do with this domain that you refuse to let go of? I'm like, it's such a good domain.
Little did you know, Trump had plans for you.
I had no idea.
The omniscient one.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time. You're welcome back whenever you want. We're both in here, so if you ever just want to come through and talk about,
I'm gonna have a very exciting thing to show off next year. Then I'd love to come back.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think even you know about this.
Well, this is a cliffhanger. Can you talk about it or no?
I'll give you a clue.
Okay.
Road trip.
Okay.
That's
All right. I like that cliffhanger. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget.
The check-in with Bridget and Cousin Maggie can now be found at Phetasy.com. It's been titled Another Round with Bridget Phetasy, and it's now in video.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. the dumbest line.